Hey, I'm Eric. Welcome back to another episode of From Prison to the Streets. I'm sorry I've been away for a while, but here I am now, and today we are going to be talking about 5 prison myths. So, yeah, be sure to like and subscribe, and with a couple other things, we're going to get into it, but I just wanted to wish everybody a happy new year. I hope your new year is great. I am recording this on New Year's Eve, but happy new year. Thank you to my subscribers. Thank you to all my viewers. I really appreciate you guys stopping by the channel, and I appreciate you guys. Thank you, solitary individual, for wishing me a happy new year. I appreciate that. I hope you have a happy new year as well. So let's talk about this 5 prison myths. The number 1 myth, what is it? How about dropping the soap? That's got to be the biggest thing. You see it in movies, and you also see it in movies. But that's a common misconception. That's a common prison myth, that if you drop the soap, when you go to pick up the soap and bend over, you're going to get boogered. And that just doesn't happen. You know, that doesn't happen. Maybe it happens somewhere, but not in the prisons that I was in. Myth number 2. Cigarettes are currency. Not really. Cigarettes are more of a product that you would pay currency for. Commissary is currency. You know, stuff like ramen noodle soups, soda, coffee is a big one, stamps, but not so much cigarettes. Cigarettes were taken out of prisons in, I think, most of the US back in the early 2000s due to lawsuits and concerns over secondhand smoke. So really, you know, smoking isn't allowed in prison. It still goes on, but I wouldn't say there's enough tobacco for it to be used as currency. It's just not that convenient. Most of the time, if people have tobacco, they're just going to smoke it or chew it. Myth number 3, free time. Everybody is under the impression that prisoners have a whole bunch of time on their hands. Some people think that that's why everybody in prison is super buff and things like that. Well, you know, all you have is time to sit around and work out. That's not true. You have a choice to be involved in stuff when you're in prison. They have classes you can take. You have yard you can go to, and you can work out on the yard, but that's also, at least in Kansas prisons, when the yard is open is also when you have your library time. It's not like that in every prison in the state, but in most of them. So if you want to go to the library, you're not going to work out that day. You also have a job assignment. Most people aren't going to be in their cell all day. Most people are going to be at work. It's actually required in Kansas that you have a job because, you know, the state doesn't just give you stuff. Your shampoo, deodorant, soap, all that stuff isn't just given to you by the state. You have to pay for it. So you pay for that by working a job, and usually you'll make anywhere from, 40 cents a day. Sometimes I think the lowest one you can get is 25 cents a day, and the best one you can get is $1.05 a day. And at $1.05 a day, if you're working 7 days a week, it equals out to about $29.40 a month. And I don't know if you guys pay a lot of attention to the prices of hygiene items, but they can get pretty expensive. So $29.40 a month doesn't go very far, so you kind of have to work your tail off. In addition to your regular job, you're probably going to have some sort of hustle. That's a side business that you might have. Maybe you will make jewelry like I did. Some guys do needlework. They'll knit or crochet or whatever and sell blankets. Some guys will do other needlework, like they'll do tattoos. So, you will have some form of hustle to make extra money. So you have a job, you have your side hustle, you have library time, you have classes that you can go to, you have your religious call-outs. At one time, I was going to church damn near 7 days a week. Then I realized that I didn't like Christianity very much. It's not for me, so races don't mingle. That is our myth number 4. Now, this is a tricky one because it's going to change slightly. The dynamics are going to change slightly depending on what prison you're at. In most of your medium facilities in Kansas, you will see people of different races, associating with each other. That's not a big deal. You'll have a white guy sitting with a black guy at a table, or a Mexican guy, or whatever. That's not uncommon. You'll even see people of different races going to different racial call-outs. And what I mean by that is certain religious groups in prison are associated with certain racial groups. For example, the Muslim call-out in prison is predominantly black. The Native American call-out in prison is predominantly Hispanic. The Asatru religion is predominantly white. But in low-medium camps and high-medium camps, you will see guys, like you'll see a white guy going to the Muslim call-out or something like that. It's not uncommon. Now in max facilities, it's a little bit different. You will have tables that you don't sit at, especially with affiliations. That's where race comes into play, with affiliation for the most part. In Lansing, max behind the walls, as soon as you get there, someone's going to pull up on you. They're going to want to know what you're in for and what set you run with, who you represent. And most gangs in prison are racially divided, So usually you will sit with people of your race or, something like that. But it's not a rigid rule. Even when I was in Lansing, I sat with friends of mine who were black. I didn't have an issue with that. The guys that are gang affiliated will make a big deal out of sitting with just their race. So if you're in a white gang, you're going to sit with white people. And if you're affiliated, you're probably going to make a bigger deal out of race than someone who's not affiliated. So if you see someone from another race who is sitting with people from a different race, chances are they're a pretty laid back individual and they might not be a bad person to hang out with. So the idea that it's all racially, segregated is not exactly true. You can still have friends with other races, at least in Kansas prisons. The one thing though that I will say is you don't usually want to live with someone from another race, because if you guys get into it, it can turn into a race war. With cellies, there's going to be a time when you're not going to get along and you're going to get into it, and you will probably end up having some racial issues if you get into it. I had a buddy of mine who was living with a black guy, and he beat the black guy up pretty bad, and the black guy went and told all his buddies about it, and it damn near started a race war, because a bunch of black dudes were going to jump on him. And there's just certain things. You don't let a bunch of people of any race beat up one of your friends. You don't let one of your friends get jumped. But because it was a bunch of black guys who were going to beat him up, a bunch of white guys stood up for him, and it ended up being this big race thing. So it's not a great idea to live with someone who's with another race. Myth number 5, all sex offenders are targets. That's not true. Now, a lot of guys with sex cases are targets. I'm not going to say they're not targets in prison. I went to prison for shooting a guy who was an alleged pedophile, but there are people in prison with sex cases who probably shouldn't be in prison. If you're 17 years old, your girlfriend's 15 years old, y'all have sex, I don't know that you should go to prison for that. It's statutory rape because the girlfriend can't really give consent due to her age, but if the dude's 17, then technically he can't give consent either. From my studies in education, the brain doesn't really fully develop its abilities to think properly along some lines and think about the consequences of decisions till you're like 25. So, could the 17-year-old really give consent? I don't really think so either. But for either party to go to prison in that case, I don't know if that's right. I knew a guy who was in prison because he was exchanging nude pictures with his girlfriend, and they were both teenagers, and there were, multiple nude pictures involved, and so the dude ended up getting charged as an adult and going to prison with, a child pornography case, which looks horrible on paper, but then when you figure out what really happened, it's another story. So those are prison myths. I hope you enjoyed the video. I'm Eric. This has been another episode of From Prison to the Streets. I will see you all later. Break these chains.